The air in the TechCorp command center was thick with the metallic scent of fear and burnt coffee. It was a cavernous space, a digital cathedral built to worship the gods of data and bandwidth. But tonight, it was a tomb. 100 monitors lining the curved walls, normally a placid, reassuring blue, now pulsed with a violent, synchronized crimson. Each screen screamed the same silent digital curse: breach detected. 20 engineers, the best and brightest poached from Stanford and MIT, moved with the frantic, useless energy of drowning men. Keyboards clattered a desperate staccato, a prayer against the inevitable. Voices sharp with panic sliced through the low hum of the servers. Firewall 6 is down. They're through Firewall 6. They're not brute forcing it. They're walking right in. How are they walking right in? Reroute the primary data core, isolate the client servers. Now. At the center of the maelstrom stood Michael Harrison, Chief Technology Officer, a man whose tailored Italian suit and $50,000 watch were usually enough to project an aura of unshakable control. Tonight the suit was wrinkled, the watch a mockery on his wrist. A vein pulsed in his temple, a tiny, furious drumbeat against his marble-white skin. His face was a mask of controlled fury, but his eyes, darting from screen to screen, betrayed the raw terror beneath. They were losing. Millions of dollars were hemorrhaging from the company with every passing second. Worse, the data of their most powerful clients, banks, governments, rival corporations, was being siphoned away by an invisible, unstoppable enemy. Status. He barked, his voice cracking like a whip over the heads of his team. A young engineer named David Park, his face slick with sweat, looked up. They're bypassing every protocol we throw at them, Michael. It's like they have a key. They're not breaking down the doors. They're unlocking them. That's impossible, Michael snarled, though the cold dread in his gut told him it was true. He had built this system. He knew its strengths, its redundancies, its layers of impenetrable defense. Or so he had believed. For 3 hours they had fought this ghost, this digital phantom, and with every move they made, the phantom was already 2 steps ahead. It was a public execution, a slow, methodical dismantling of his reputation, his career, his entire world. It was into this vortex of technological collapse that Kesha Williams walked unnoticed. She moved with an economy of motion, learned from years of navigating crowded city streets and hostile apartment building lobbies. Her uniform, a simple black polo shirt with the logo of a food delivery app, was clean, but faded. A large insulated thermal backpack was slung over her shoulders, its cubic shape a strange analog intrusion in this realm of pure data. She was a ghost of a different kind, a service worker trained to be invisible, her presence meant to be felt only by the arrival of a hot meal. She held a paper bag containing a gourmet sandwich and a bottle of expensive sparkling water. Order for Michael Harrison. She scanned the chaotic room, her eyes adjusting to the hellish red glow. She had seen panicked men before, but this was different. This was the panic of kings watching their castle burn. Her gaze drifted from the frantic faces to the screens. She saw the cascading lines of code, the error messages flashing too quickly for most to read. But Kesha's mind didn't work like most. Where the engineers saw chaos, she saw patterns. Her brain a machine honed not in pristine university labs, but in the cluttered backroom of her mother's failing electronics repair shop, began to process the information. She saw the intruder's digital signature, the elegant, almost contemptuous way it sidestepped their defenses. It wasn't using brute force. It wasn't exploiting a new zero-day vulnerability. It was using something old, something fundamental. She spotted Michael Harrison by his suit and his central position in the storm. She walked towards him, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the polished concrete floor. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the noise with an unnatural ease. Michael spun around, his face a thunderous mask. "What? Who the hell are you? Can't you see we're in the middle of a catastrophe?" "Your lunch, Sir," Kesha said, holding out the bag. Her eyes, however, were fixed on the main screen behind him, a massive monitor displaying the core architecture of the system's defense. An error code flashed, one they'd been trying to bypass for an hour. "Air bypass protocol sever obsolete." A faint memory stirred in her from a late night years ago, studying archaic network protocols in a dusty textbook she'd bought for $1. Protocol 7, a relic from the early days of server architecture, inefficient, full of security holes, and supposedly scrubbed from every modern system on the planet. Yet here it was, not just present but acting as a gate. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her gaze still locked on the screen. She placed the paper bag on the edge of a console away from the frantic hands. "But your problem isn't the attack. It's your foundation. The attacker is using an old authentication handshake. It's a back door." The room went silent. The clattering of keyboards ceased. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at her. It was a silence so profound, so heavy with disbelief and indignation, that the hum of the servers seemed to roar into the vacuum. Michael Harrison stared at her as if she had just sprouted a second head. His mind, already strained to the breaking point, struggled to process the absurdity. A delivery driver, a young black woman in a cheap uniform, was standing in the heart of his multi-billion-dollar command center, diagnosing a problem that his entire team of elite engineers had failed to solve. He felt a wave of hot, blind fury wash over him. It was a rage born of humiliation and a deeper, colder fear. Because in the instant she said the word backdoor, a memory he had buried for a decade clawed its way to the surface. Project Chimera, a diagnostic tool he had built into the system's core architecture during its initial development. A shortcut, a master key that allowed him to bypass security protocols for quick fixes. He had meant to remove it before the system went live. He had forgotten. The ghost in his machine wasn't an outside attacker. It was him. And this girl, this nobody, had just seen it. "A backdoor," he finally managed to say, forcing a laugh that sounded like tearing metal. The sound was a signal to his team. The tension broke, replaced by a wave of derisive snickers. David Park stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Listen, sweetheart. Why don't you stick to delivering sandwiches? This is a little above your pay grade." "She probably saw a movie once," another engineer muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Michael's smile was a predatory slash. He advanced on Kesha, using his height and the power of his position to try and make her shrink. "Let me get this straight. You, in between dropping off pizzas and tacos, have solved a catastrophic state-sponsored cyber attack that has stumped 20 of the world's best engineers." Kesha didn't shrink. She stood her ground, her expression unreadable. Her calmness was an affront, a quiet rebellion that infuriated him more than any shouted retort could. She met his gaze, and for a fleeting second, he saw an intelligence in her eyes that was ancient and unyielding. "It's an old legacy protocol," she said simply, her voice retaining its unnerving composure. "Protocol 7. The attacker isn't bypassing your firewalls. You're letting them in because the core system still recognizes that protocol as a master key. You're not fighting an intruder. You're holding the door open for them. You have to sever the connection to that protocol at the root kernel level. A full system reboot won't work. It will just re-authenticate the connection upon startup." Every word was a perfectly aimed bullet striking deep into the heart of Michael's secret shame. She knew. It was impossible, but she knew. His mind reeled. Who was this woman? Had someone sent her? Was this a setup? The paranoia was a cold poison in his veins, but all he saw was a delivery driver, and his fear curdled back into rage. "Get her out of here," he roared, pointing a trembling finger at her. "Now, and someone call her employer. I want her fired. Trespassing, corporate espionage for all I know. Get her out." Two security guards who had been watching from the doorway moved forward uncertainly. Kesha didn't wait for them. She picked up her thermal backpack, the sandwich, and water still sitting on the console forgotten. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. She looked back not at Michael, but at the panicking engineers. "You have about 5 minutes before they reach the core data archives," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "When they do, they won't just be stealing your data. They'll start deleting it. Good luck." She walked out, the heavy door hissing shut behind her. For a moment, the room was still. Then, as if her words were a prophecy, a new alert flashed across the main screen. It was different from the others. It was a simple, terrifying progress bar. Core archive purge 1%. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. David Park frantically typed a command, his face ashen. She was right. Oh God, she was right. "I'm locked out of the root kernel. It's not accepting my credentials." Michael Harrison didn't hear him. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was staring at the door through which Kesha Williams had disappeared. The casual arrogance, the condescending smirks, all of it had vanished, burned away by a firestorm of pure, unadulterated hatred. She hadn't just seen his failure. She had seen his soul, and in that moment, he knew he would not rest until he had destroyed her. The chaos at TechCorp did not end. It merely changed form. After Kesha's departure, a terrified David Park, following her prophetic instructions, managed to sever the connection to the archaic Protocol 7. The digital bleeding stopped. The system battered and violated was stabilized. A fragile quiet descended upon the command center, the silence of a battlefield after the slaughter. In the pristine glass box of his 50th floor office, Michael Harrison did not feel relief. He felt the cold, creeping tendrils of absolute terror. He had survived the night, but the dawn promised a different kind of execution. The board of directors, the SEC, their clients, they would all demand a sacrifice, an explanation, a head on a platter. And the only explanation led directly to Project Chimera, to a decade-old sin of arrogance and neglect that he had buried and forgotten. He sat at his obsidian desk, the city of Chicago, sprawling beneath him like a circuit board of cold, indifferent lights. For hours he stared at a single line of code he had pulled from the system's deepest, most archaic logs. Auth Josh Override Gate Chimera V1 DetSys. His creation, his backdoor, his potential ruin. The delivery girl's face swam in his vision, her calm, knowing eyes, the quiet certainty in her voice. How could she have known it was a fluke? A lucky guess, a 1 in a billion shot. It had to be. To believe otherwise was to accept that his entire world, built on the myth of his own genius, was a fragile house of cards. And she, a nobody, had just pulled out the foundation. He would not fall alone. He would not fall at all. A plan began to form in the cold, precise chambers of his mind. It was a plan born of pure, distilled survival instinct. He needed more than a scapegoat. He needed a story. A plausible, technically sound narrative that would redirect the coming firestorm so completely that no one would ever think to look at him again. And Kesha Williams, the girl with a half-finished computer science degree and a delivery app uniform, was the perfect villain. His fingers began to fly across the holographic keyboard, his earlier panic replaced by a chilling, methodical focus. He was no longer just a CTO. He was an artist, and his medium was digital deception. He began by building a ghost. He created a series of encrypted shell accounts on servers in Eastern Europe, routing their IP addresses through a chain of public proxies that terminated at a cell tower on the south side of Chicago, 2 blocks from Kesha's registered address. It was circumstantial, but it was a start. Next, he delved into the server logs from the night of the attack. He couldn't erase the use of the Chimera protocol, the digital fingerprints were too deep, but he could alter the narrative of how it was activated. He meticulously crafted a false trail, a series of low-level pings and failed access attempts originating from his fabricated ghost IP, all time-stamped in the weeks leading up to the attack. It would look like the attackers had been probing the system for weeks, searching for a way in. The masterpiece, however, was the communication log. On a forgotten, low-traffic data storage server, he planted a fragmented, heavily encrypted conversation. He used an algorithm to mimic the linguistic patterns of dark web hacker forums. The messages spoke of an inside asset codenamed Janus, who had provided the key, the Chimera exploit, for a price. He then fabricated a single tiny transaction, 0.5 Bitcoin, transferred from an untraceable wallet to a newly created one. He couldn't link the new wallet directly to Kesha, but he did the next best thing. He backtraced one of its funding inputs to a public Wi-Fi hotspot at a coffee shop near her apartment, on a day and time he could confirm she had been working thanks to the delivery app's public data. It was a web of lies, but each thread was woven with technical truth. It was a fiction that would pass the scrutiny of any forensic analyst who wasn't looking for a deeper conspiracy. He leaned back, a grim satisfaction settling over him. He had turned her lucky guess into a confession. He had turned her into Janus. The final step was to make the anonymous tip. The smell of stale coffee and burnt toast hung in the air of Kesha Williams's small apartment. It was a world away from the sterile perfection of TechCorp. Here life was a cluttered, chaotic, and beautiful thing. Wires and circuit boards from half-finished projects covered the small kitchen table nestled between a bottle of her mother's heart medication and a stack of overdue bills. "You're going to set the smoke alarm off again," a weak voice called from the living room. Kesha scraped the blackened toast into the bin, a small smile touching her lips. "It's called tactical charring, Mom. It wards off evil spirits." Helen Williams sat propped up on the worn sofa, a thick afghan pulled over her frail body. Chemotherapy had stolen her hair and much of her strength, but it had not touched the fierce, loving light in her eyes. Well, the only evil spirit in this house is that toaster. I swear it's been trying to kill me since 2005. Kesha brought her mother a cup of tea and a piece of acceptably browned toast. How are you feeling today? Like $1,000,000. Helen lied, her voice raspy. If $1,000,000 felt like it got hit by a bus. Kesha sat on the arm of the sofa, her hand gently stroking her mother's arm. This was her world. This was her why. The late nights, studying the endless shifts delivering food in the biting Chicago wind, the quiet desperation of watching the medical bills pile up, it was all for this woman. The firing from the delivery app stung a petty and confusing injustice, but she'd already applied for 3 other jobs. It was a setback, not a stop. She wouldn't let it be. She hadn't told her mother about the incident at TechCorp. There was no need to worry her with the bizarre drama of it all. It was over. A strange, humiliating encounter with a powerful man on the worst day of his life. She would forget it. The knock on the door was not a rap. It was 3 hard percussive thuds that vibrated through the floorboards. It was the sound of authority. Kesha frowned. Were you expecting someone? Helen shook her head, her eyes wide with a flicker of apprehension. Kesha moved to the door and peered through the peephole. Her blood went cold. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in dark suits, stood in the hallway. They weren't selling anything. Who is it? Helen whispered. Before Kesha could answer, the knocking came again, louder this time. FBI opened the door. Her mind froze. FBI. It was a mistake. It had to be a mistake. Her hand trembled as she unlatched the deadbolt and opened the door a crack. A badge was held up to her face, stark and official. Kesha Williams, the lead agent, asked, his voice calm and devoid of emotion. Yes, we have a warrant to search the premises. He didn't wait for an answer. He pushed the door open, and the other 2 agents moved past her into the tiny apartment. It was a brutal, seamless violation. One agent began speaking to her mother in a low, placating tone, while the other 2 started moving through her home with a practiced, detached efficiency. What is this about? Kesha demanded, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and outrage. You can't just come in here. Ma'am, please remain calm, the lead agent said, holding up the warrant. This is in connection with the cyber attack on TechCorp. The name hit her like a physical blow. TechCorp. Michael Harrison. Get her out, corporate espionage for all I know. He had actually done it. The thought was so insane, so malevolent that her mind couldn't fully grasp it. They moved with methodical speed. They bagged her old custom-built desktop computer, her laptop, every hard drive and flash drive she owned. They took files of her old college notes diagrams she had sketched for personal projects. From her mother's horrified gaze to the curious, pitying faces of her neighbors peering from their doorways, the world seemed to shrink into a vortex of shame and confusion. You have the right to remain silent, the agent began, and the rest of his words became a dull roar in her ears. Handcuffs. The cold metallic click around her wrists. The short, mortifying walk to the black sedan parked at the curb. She caught one last glimpse of her mother's face in the window, a mask of pure terror and disbelief, before she was pushed into the back of the car. The interrogation room was a perfect cube of gray. No windows, no clock, just a steel table and 3 chairs. It was designed to strip a person of all context, all sense of time and place, until the only reality was the room itself. Kesha had been sitting in the cold, humming silence for what felt like an eternity. The calm dignity she had possessed at TechCorp was gone, flayed away by the raid, the cuffs, the crushing weight of the unknown. Finally, the door opened and 2 agents walked in. One was the lead agent from the raid. The other was an older man with tired, intelligent eyes. They didn't introduce themselves. They sat down opposite her and placed a thick file on the table. Let's make this easy, Ms. Williams, the older agent began, his voice a low, reasonable hum. We know you didn't act alone. We just want to know who you were working with. Working with? I don't know what you're talking about. I delivered a sandwich. The agent sighed, a practiced sound of disappointment. He opened the file. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a map of Chicago with a red circle around a cell tower. This is the origin point for the initial probes against TechCorp's servers. It's 2 blocks from your apartment. He pushed another paper forward, a string of incomprehensible code. These are fragments of encrypted messages recovered from a TechCorp server. They mention an inside asset codenamed Janus providing the exploit. The messages were sent from the same origin point. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was impossible. It was a nightmare. That's not me. I didn't do any of that. Then maybe you can explain this? The agent said, sliding a final document across the steel table. It was a cryptocurrency transaction log. Half a Bitcoin transferred to this wallet the day before the attack. The wallet was funded through a Wi-Fi hotspot at a coffee shop called The Daily Grind. Records show you were there that afternoon. You even used your credit card to buy a latte. Kesha stared at the paper, her vision blurring. It was perfect. The evidence was insane, fabricated, a work of pure fiction, but it was also technically flawless. A web of half-truths and digital lies so expertly woven that it looked like reality. She could see the narrative they had built, a neat, compelling story of a disgruntled, brilliant college dropout who used her inside access as a delivery driver to sell a corporate secret. She was innocent. But as she looked at the cold, irrefutable evidence on the table, a horrifying realization dawned. She couldn't prove it. Michael Harrison hadn't just framed her. He had buried her. The older agent leaned forward, his face a mask of weary sympathy. He slid a photograph of her, a grainy security still from the TechCorp lobby, across the table. "We know you're smart, Kesha," he said, using her first name for the first time. "We know you have the skills. We just need to understand why. Why did you do it?" The wheels of justice, Kesha discovered, were not just slow. They were crushing. She was released after 48 hours in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and despair. Released, but not free. A public defender, a young man with tired eyes and a caseload that would have broken a saint, had managed to get her released on bail, pending a federal arraignment. The bail was set at an astronomical sum, secured by an anonymous bond posted by a Concerned Citizens Civil Liberties group that her lawyer couldn't identify. It wasn't an act of charity. It was a leash. Her new reality was a cage 500 square feet in size. A thick plastic band, her ankle monitor, was a constant, humiliating reminder of her confinement. It chafed against her skin, a 21st century shackle. She was forbidden from leaving her apartment except for medical appointments for her mother and meetings with her lawyer. The internet, her native language, was now a forbidden country. Her router was confiscated, her phone's data plan disabled. The world had shrunk to the four walls of her apartment, the view of a brick wall from her window, and the sound of her mother's labored breathing from the other room. Helen's health had plummeted. The stress of the raid, the fear of seeing her daughter in handcuffs, had been a physical blow. The cancer, which had been in a fragile remission, seemed to stir once more, feeding on their collective terror. The mountain of medical bills on the kitchen table had become an impassable Everest. Kesha spent her days in a state of suspended animation. She would read old textbooks, her mind tracing familiar lines of code, but the joy was gone. It felt like reading a love letter from someone who had betrayed you. The public defender was honest with her. "The evidence is strong, Kesha. It's all digital, all circumstantial, but it's a clean narrative. A jury will have a hard time looking past it. They'll see a smart girl who got greedy. We can plead down, maybe get you 5 years instead of 20. 5 years. The words echoed in the tiny apartment. 5 years in a federal prison, while her mother faded away alone. Despair was a physical presence, a cold, heavy thing that sat on her chest and made it hard to breathe. The world didn't want her talent. It wanted her caged. Michael Harrison hadn't just destroyed her career. He had surgically excised her future. She was staring out the window at the monotonous pattern of bricks when she saw the car, a black, impossibly sleek sedan that seemed to absorb the weak afternoon light. It didn't belong in this neighborhood of crumbling asphalt and chain-link fences. It parked directly across the street, humming with a quiet electric power. A woman emerged from the back seat. She was tall and slender, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than everything Kesha owned. Her hair was a severe, elegant sweep of silver, and she walked with a predatory grace that was utterly alien to this environment. She moved directly to Kesha's building, disappearing inside. Moments later, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't the hard official rap of the FBI. It was 2 soft, precise taps, the sound of confident intrusion. Kesha's heart hammered. Her lawyer. "No," he would have called. She opened the door. The woman stood there, her presence seeming to warp the very dimensions of the cramped hallway. A faint, expensive scent of jasmine and leather drifted from her. Her eyes were the color of a winter sky, intelligent and utterly devoid of pity. "Ms. Kesha Williams," the woman asked, her voice a low, cultured melody. "Who are you?" "My name is Elena Vance." She offered no title, no explanation. She simply looked past Kesha into the apartment. "May I come in? I assure you, I am not with the federal government." Hesitantly, Kesha stepped aside. Elena Vance walked into the small living room, her gaze taking in everything in a single sweeping glance: the worn sofa, the stack of medical bills, the faint scent of antiseptic. She moved with the unnerving confidence of someone who owned every room she entered. "Please sit," Kesha said, the words feeling absurd in her own home. Elena remained standing. "There's no need for pleasantries, Ms. Williams. I am here because you are in a great deal of trouble, and I am the only person on this planet who can make it go away." Kesha stared at her. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't." Elena's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "You've been playing checkers your whole life. You just stumbled onto a chessboard, and you are for the moment the most vulnerable piece on it." She began to pace, her movements as precise as a panther's. "Let me tell you what you already know. You were framed by Michael Harrison, the inept CTO of TechCorp. He used a backdoor he himself created, a foolish relic called Project Chimera, and when you, a food delivery driver, pointed it out, his terror and his ego collided. The result was the elaborate and, I must admit, quite elegant work of fiction that the FBI is now treating as gospel." Kesha's breath hitched. How do you know that name, Chimera?" "Because it is my business to know," Elena said. "My organization has been monitoring Michael Harrison for years. We know his weaknesses, his vanities, his professional sins. We watched him rise, and we have been patiently waiting for him to fall. The cyber attack was a gift, and your appearance in the middle of it was a miracle." She stopped pacing and turned to face Kesha directly, her gray eyes pinning her in place. "I am a senior partner at Aegis Security. We are, to put it simply, the firm corporations hire when they want to utterly and completely dismantle a competitor like TechCorp. We do not engage in petty corporate espionage. We wage war." Kesha felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. The world she knew, a world of bills and bus rides and binary code, was dissolving, replaced by something vast and terrifying. "Michael Harrison is not just an arrogant fool," Elena continued, her voice dropping to an intense whisper. "He is the foundational weakness of TechCorp. His negligence, his pride, his willingness to sacrifice security for speed, he is a cancer. And you, Ms. Williams, have just provided us with the scalpel we need to cut him out." Elena walked to the kitchen table and picked up one of the overdue medical bills, glancing at it with distaste before placing it back down. "This is what they have reduced you to. Worrying about co-payments while your mind, a mind that saw in seconds what 20 MIT graduates missed in hours, is left to atrophy in this box." She looked at Kesha. "I am here to offer you a way out. A complete restoration of your life." "What are you talking about?" Kesha whispered. "The anonymous bond that secured your release. That was us. We have been watching since the moment the FBI knocked on your door. Here's my proposal. You agree to work for Aegis Security. In return, within 72 hours, all federal charges against you will be dropped. The evidence will be revealed as a fabrication. Michael Harrison's career will be incinerated. Your name will be cleared publicly and permanently." Kesha's mind reeled. It was impossible. A fantasy. You can't just make federal charges disappear. Elena's cold smile returned. "Ms. Williams, the men I employ for legal matters do not argue with federal prosecutors. They are the men who train them. The FBI's case is built on a digital fabrication. We will provide them with irrefutable proof of that fabrication, along with the source code for Project Chimera and Harrison's private logs showing his attempts to cover it up. He will be the one facing an indictment, not you. Your life will be returned to you pristine and untouched." The offer hung in the air, a lifeline of impossible strength. For a moment, Kesha felt a wave of pure, unadulterated hope. Freedom. Her name cleared. Justice. "And what do you want from me in return?" she asked, knowing the price would be high. Elena's expression hardened. The mask of the benefactor fell away, revealing the predator beneath. "We want your mind, your talent, your loyalty. You will join us, and you will help us do to TechCorp what Harrison tried to do to you. We will not frame them. We will simply expose the truth of their incompetence, a truth that runs far deeper than one forgotten backdoor. You will be our primary analytical weapon. You will have access to resources, technology, and information you cannot even imagine. You will never deliver a sandwich again. You will never worry about a medical bill again. You will not be a suspect, Ms. Williams. You will be a weapon." The word hung in the air cold and sharp. A weapon. Kesha looked past Elena through the doorway into the living room where her mother was sleeping, her breathing a shallow, fragile rhythm. She thought of the 5 years in a concrete cell her lawyer had promised her. She thought of the ankle monitor, a constant brand of her guilt. Aegis wasn't offering justice. They were offering a transaction, her soul for her freedom. They didn't care that she was innocent. They only cared that she was useful. She would be trading one cage for another, a larger, more comfortable cage to be sure, but a cage nonetheless where her talent would be aimed and fired at the behest of others. Could she do it? Could she become what they wanted her to be, just to survive? Elena seemed to read her thoughts. She walked to the door, pulling a slim, impossibly elegant business card from her suit pocket. It was made of dark, heavy stock with her name and a single stylized A embossed in silver. No number, no address. She placed it on the cluttered kitchen table, a stark island of order in a sea of chaos. "You have 24 hours to decide, Ms. Williams." Elena said, her voice once again a cool, distant melody. "My car will be outside this building tomorrow at 4 p.m. If you are in it, your new life begins. If you are not, then our intervention on your behalf will cease and the federal justice system will proceed as planned. And I assure you it will not be lenient." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Think carefully. Consider what it is you truly want to save. Your principles or your mother." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Kesha alone in the suffocating silence of her apartment. She walked to the table and stared at the card. It represented 2 futures, each one more terrifying than the last. One led to a prison cell and the loss of everything she held dear. The other led into the shadows to a world of corporate warfare, where she would be a queen, but also a pawn. A weapon gilded and polished, but a weapon still. And she had 24 hours to choose her cage. For 23 hours, Kesha Williams existed in a state of purgatory. The small silver-embossed card sat on her kitchen table, a silent ultimatum. It was a key to 2 different doors, each leading to a unique kind of hell. Behind one door lay the cold bureaucratic machinery of federal prison, a slow, grinding destruction of her life and her mother's. Behind the other lay the shadows, a world of gilded cages and moral compromise, a place where her mind would be celebrated, but her soul would be collateral. She spent the day watching her mother. She saw the new lines of fear etched around Helen's eyes, the way her already frail hands trembled when she thought Kesha wasn't looking. She heard the soft, desperate prayers her mother whispered when she passed the bedroom door. Helen wasn't just sick. She was heartbroken, terrified by a world that could so easily devour her child. In her mother's fear, Kesha found her answer. Principles were a luxury for those who had nothing left to lose. She still had everything. At 3:59 p.m., the afternoon sun casting long, weary shadows across the cracked pavement, Kesha walked out of her apartment building. She wore the same clean but faded clothes she'd been arrested in. She carried nothing. The black sedan was there, parked in the exact same spot, its tinted windows revealing nothing, its engine a silent electric hum. It was a phantom waiting to ferry her to the underworld. The back door opened with a soft, expensive click. She got in. The door closed, sealing her inside a cocoon of cool jasmine-scented leather. The car glided away from the curb with a smoothness that felt like leaving the ground, severing her from the world of cracked sidewalks and desperate prayers without a single sound. She did not look back. The Aegis security headquarters was not a skyscraper. It was an anonymous 5-story block of smoked glass and matte black granite nestled in a quiet industrial part of the city. It had no name, no logo, only a single stylized A, discreetly etched into the glass doors. It was a building designed to be overlooked, a fortress hiding in plain sight. Inside, the world shifted. The interior was a cathedral of minimalist design, white marble floors, brushed steel accents, and vast open spaces where people moved with the silent, focused intensity of sharks. There was no chaotic energy, no panicked shouting. There was only the low hum of immense controlled power. Kesha was led not to an office but to a residential suite on the top floor. It was an apartment, but it was also a cell. The furnishings were sparse and elegant. The technology was state-of-the-art, and the floor-to-ceiling window offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city. It was a cage with a beautiful view. "This will be your home," Elena Vance said, standing in the doorway. She had been waiting for her. "All your needs will be provided for. Food, clothing, any technical resources you require. Your mother's medical care has already been taken over by our private physicians, the best in the country. She will want for nothing." The words were meant to be reassuring, but they felt like the closing of a contract. "What about the charges?" Kesha asked, her voice sounding small in the vast, quiet space. Elena gestured to a large screen on the wall. "Watch." The screen flickered to life, showing a live news broadcast. A stern-faced reporter stood on the steps of the federal courthouse. "We have breaking news in the TechCorp cyber attack case. The FBI has just announced that all charges against Kesha Williams have been dropped. In a stunning reversal, a spokesperson stated that new evidence has emerged, pointing to a sophisticated frame job. A man in a dark, severe suit appeared on the screen. He was introduced as Julian Croft, a former federal prosecutor. Kesha recognized him as the man who had been waiting for her in the Aegis lobby. "The evidence against Ms. Williams was a meticulous digital fabrication," Croft said, his voice dripping with authority. "Furthermore, our firm has provided the FBI with irrefutable proof that the source of the TechCorp breach was an internal undocumented protocol, known as Project Chimera, created and subsequently neglected by CTO Michael Harrison, who is now a person of interest in this ongoing investigation." Kesha watched, her face numb. It was happening, exactly as Elena had promised. Her name was being cleared, her innocence declared to the world. But the feeling wasn't triumph. It was a hollow, chilling emptiness. Justice had arrived not as a righteous verdict, but as a corporate maneuver, a calculated move on a chessboard she was only just beginning to understand. She was free, but the price was a debt she would now have to pay. Her training began the next morning. It was not an orientation. It was an immolation. Aegis did not seek to nurture her talent. They sought to burn away everything else. They wanted the pure, weaponized core of her intellect. She was introduced to a man known only as Silas, a former Mossad cyber warfare specialist with dead eyes and hands that moved over a keyboard like a surgeon's. He was her primary instructor, her tormentor, her creator. "Your methods are chaotic," Silas told her on the first day after watching her effortlessly dismantle one of his firewalls in a simulation. "You think like an artist, a prodigy. It's beautiful, but it is also a liability. Art is emotional. War is mathematics. We are going to teach you the mathematics of destruction." For weeks, she lived in a digital crucible. They pushed her for 20 hours a day. They threw her into complex simulations against teams of Aegis's own elite hackers. They taught her not just to defend, but to attack. To think like a predator. To see vulnerabilities not just in code, but in the human beings who wrote it. They taught her social engineering, data puppetry, corporate subterfuge. She learned how to crash a stock market with a single line of code, how to turn a CEO's smart home into a surveillance device, how to find the digital skeletons in any corporation's closet. It was exhilarating. For the first time in her life, her mind was not just unleashed, it was augmented, amplified, given access to limitless power. She felt her brain rewiring itself, becoming faster, sharper, more efficient. The self-taught, intuitive style that had been her gift was systematically broken down and reforged into something disciplined, precise, and lethal. But with the exhilaration came a creeping horror. She was learning to ruin lives with the same detached efficiency as deleting a line of code. In the simulations, she targeted fictional employees, finding their personal secrets, debts, affairs, addictions, and using them as leverage to gain access to their systems. The faces in the simulations were stock photos, but in the lonely hours of the night, they began to haunt her. Were they any different from her, a person in a desperate situation being exploited by a power they couldn't fight? She was becoming a digital version of the forces that had almost destroyed her. Elena Vance was her constant spectral guide through this transformation. She would appear in the training room observing Kesha's progress with an unreadable analytical gaze. She was not a mentor, she was a handler, and Kesha was her prize asset. "You are hesitating," Elena said one afternoon after Kesha failed a simulation because she refused to use a fictional employee's medical records as blackmail. "It felt wrong," Kesha admitted, her voice low. Elena's expression did not soften. "Wrong is a feeling. Defeat is a fact. Emotion is a vulnerability that our enemies will exploit without a moment's hesitation. Justice is a luxury afforded to the victor. We are not in the business of justice, Ms. Williams. We are in the business of results. Do you understand? Kesha understood all too well. Aegis had saved her not out of a sense of right and wrong, but because she was valuable. A tool. And a tool does not question its purpose. The final test came without warning. Silas loaded a simulation. It was a full-scale, real-time replica of a mid-sized financial firm. Your objective, Silas said, his voice flat. Complete corporate decapitation. Neutralize their leadership, seize their assets, and trigger a hostile takeover. You have 90 minutes. Kesha plunged into the system. She did not hesitate. She moved with a cold, terrifying precision. She used an analyst's gambling debts to gain his credentials. She exploited a CFO's affair to access the company's private servers. She initiated a cascade of automated stock trades that sent the company's value plummeting. She locked the CEO out of his own network using a vulnerability in his home security system. It was a symphony of destruction, and she was its conductor. She completed the objective in 74 minutes. She leaned back from the console, her body trembling, her mind eerily calm. The simulation screen showed the results: a company in ruins, its assets stripped, its leadership disgraced. A victory. It felt like ash in her mouth. Elena Vance entered the silent room. She had been watching from an observation deck. She walked up behind Kesha and, in a rare, shocking gesture of physical contact, placed a cool hand on her shoulder. The pressure was not comforting. It was a brand of ownership. "You're ready," Elena said softly. Kesha stared at her own reflection in the dark screen. The face that stared back was familiar, but the eyes were different. They were colder, sharper, the eyes of a stranger who had learned the mathematics of destruction all too well. The prodigy was gone. The weapon had been forged. "Your first assignment is tomorrow morning." Elena continued, her voice a purr of satisfaction. "We have located TechCorp's most valuable and most vulnerable client. It's time to see what our new weapon can do." The target was a titan. Viridian Dynamics was not just a company. It was a cornerstone of the American military-industrial complex. They built satellites that guided drones, designed encryption for secure government communications, and held patents on technology that would define the next generation of warfare. Their security was not a line item on a budget. It was a matter of national importance, and their 9-figure exclusive security contract was the crown jewel in TechCorp's portfolio. Elena Vance laid out the objective with the dispassionate precision of a general briefing a sniper. She and Kesha stood before a holographic display in the Aegis strategy room, a space that felt more like a starship bridge than a corporate office. A complex, shimmering web of data represented Viridian's digital infrastructure. Viridian is TechCorp's masterpiece. Elena began, her voice a low clinical hum. Michael Harrison personally oversaw its design a decade ago. It is his proudest achievement, a fortress he believes to be impregnable. Your objective is to prove him wrong. She traced a line on the hologram with a slender finger. You will not steal data. You will not disrupt operations. You will not leave a single trace of damage. You will infiltrate their system, proceed directly to the heart of their command structure, the personal air-gap terminal of their CEO, Marcus Thorne, and you will leave him a message. The message will be simple. It will detail your point of entry, and it will describe with perfect accuracy what you could have done. You will give him a glimpse into the abyss, and then you will vanish. The goal is not to harm Viridian. The goal is to infect them with a terminal case of doubt in TechCorp. Kesha stared at the glowing web. This was it. The first real-world application of her newly forged skills. The simulations were over. The lives and fortunes on the other side of her screen were no longer fictional. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. This was the first payment on her debt. Their security protocols, Kesha asked, her voice sounding unnervingly professional, even to her own ears. State-of-the-art, according to TechCorp, Elena said, a hint of amusement in her tone. Which means they are built on a foundation of arrogance. You will find the flaw. That is what you do. Back in her suite, her new battlefield, Kesha began her work. For 48 hours she did not sleep. She lived on black coffee and the low, steady hum of her custom-built console. The apartment, once a symbol of her gilded cage, transformed into her digital armory. She dove into the architecture of Viridian's network, and as Elena had predicted, she saw Michael Harrison's fingerprints everywhere. She saw the elegant but overly complex firewalls designed more to impress board members than to stop a determined attacker. She saw the lazy reliance on proprietary tech corp hardware creating a monoculture ripe for exploitation. She saw the same sin she had witnessed in the command center, a core belief that the walls were high enough that no one needed to check if the doors were locked. He had built a beautiful, elaborate scarecrow and called it a fortress. Her target vector was not the main gate. That would be noisy and foolish. She searched the periphery, the vast, forgotten ecosystem of secondary devices connected to the network. The smart lighting in the parking garage, the inventory management system in the warehouse, the climate control sensors in the server rooms. Thousands of tiny, overlooked digital nerve endings. She found it at 2:37 a.m. on the second day. A vulnerability in the firmware of an industrial HVAC controller, a model manufactured by a subsidiary that TechCorp had acquired 3 years prior. The vulnerability was obscure, difficult to exploit, and in 99% of systems utterly useless. But Kesha, running a deep structural analysis, saw that at Viridian, this lowly climate control unit was through a series of lazy network configurations connected to the same internal subnet as the executive-level access printers. It was a 1 in a million flaw. It was a highway. The attack began at 3:00 a.m., the nadir of the digital world when networks are quiet and human oversight is at its lowest. Kesha's fingers moved across her keyboard in a blur of motion. This was not the frantic clatter of the panicked TechCorp engineers. This was the fluid, effortless grace of a concert pianist. Her mind entered a state of pure, crystalline focus. The world outside her, console her mother's health, her own compromised soul. The shadowy machinations of Aegis, it all dissolved. There was only the code, the puzzle, the intricate, beautiful mathematics of the fight. She slipped through the HVAC controller's firmware, a whisper in the machine. She used its access to inject a small, benign packet of data into the network, camouflaged as a routine temperature reading. The packet moved undetected to the executive printer network. From there, she pivoted, escalating her privileges with a series of elegant, custom-written exploits. She moved from printer to executive assistant's workstation, from workstation to departmental server, from server to the central domain controller. She did not trip a single alarm. To Viridian's automated security systems, her presence was invisible, her actions indistinguishable from normal network traffic. She was a ghost walking through walls. Within an hour, she had absolute control. From her console in Chicago, she could see everything. She had access to the live security feed from CEO Marcus Thorne's penthouse office. She watched the empty leather chair, the massive oak desk, the quiet sleeping city beyond his window. She pulled up the schematics for Viridian's most secret project, a next-generation stealth drone, its files protected by layers of encryption she now held the keys to. She watched the silent, ceaseless river of money flowing through their private financial servers, a torrent of data representing billions of dollars in assets. A part of her, the prodigy who loved the intellectual purity of the puzzle, felt a surge of triumphant adrenaline. But another part, the girl who had been crushed by the casual cruelty of powerful men, felt a wave of nausea. She was looking into the heart of an empire, uninvited, unseen. The power she wielded was absolute, and it felt like a violation. She thought of her mother sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, thanks to the Aegis-provided doctors, and the thought was both an anchor and a shackle. This was the price. It was time to leave her message. Marcus Thorne's personal terminal was a thing of legend. It was not connected to any network, internal or external. It was air-gapped, a digital island, its data transferred only by a physically inserted, heavily encrypted hard drive. It was in theory the most secure computer on the planet. Kesha, having gained control of the room's core operating system, simply waited. She accessed the terminal's internal hardware drivers through a deep system exploit. She did not need the network. She could speak directly to the machine. She composed the message, her words as precise and cold as the code she had used to get here. At 4:17 a.m., she sent the command. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Viridian Dynamics, was a man who believed in discipline. He was at his desk every morning by 6:00 a.m. He was a creature of habit, and his habit was power. That morning, as he entered his silent, sunlit office, he saw it. Words glowing in a simple white sans serif font on the screen of his untouchable terminal. His heart stopped. That screen was never supposed to display anything unless he himself had turned it on. He approached the desk slowly as if it were a bomb. He read the words. Mr. Thorne, it is 4:17 a.m. I am currently inside your network. I gained access through a vulnerability in the HVAC controller in your primary server room. From there, I pivoted to your executive network through an unsecured printer driver. In the last hour, I have had complete unrestricted and undetected root access to your entire digital infrastructure. For example, 1. I could have rerouted the $2.7 billion in your Q3 profit holding account to an untraceable wallet in the Cayman Islands. Transaction time 90 seconds. 2. I could have downloaded and then permanently deleted all 3.2 terabytes of proprietary research for your Project Nightingale stealth drone. Your backups would have been deleted simultaneously. 3. I could have activated the microphones and cameras on the workstations of all 500 of your senior executives, creating a permanent surveillance network inside your own company. I have done none of these things. Your security provided by TechCorp is an illusion. You have built your fortress on a foundation of sand. You have 24 hours to address this before this vulnerability is made public. A concerned observer. Thorne stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. For a full minute he did not move. Then he acted. He did not panic. He did not shout. He picked up his secure satellite phone and made a single call. Get me my head of security. Get me my general counsel. Get me my entire board of directors. Conference call. 5 minutes. The fallout was a silent, controlled explosion. Within an hour, Viridian's internal security team had confirmed every detail of the message. The breach was real. The infiltration path was exactly as described. They were completely, utterly, and humiliatingly exposed. Marcus Thorne ended the emergency board meeting and made his second call. He dialed Michael Harrison's private number. Harrison answered, his voice smooth and confident. Marcus, to what do I owe the pleasure? Your system is a sieve, Michael Thorne said, his voice a low, lethal snarl. Our entire network has been compromised. Every secret we have is gone. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. Marcus, that's impossible. Our systems are... Your systems are a joke, Thorne spat. Our contract is suspended effective immediately. Every payment is frozen. I am sending a team of my own auditors to your headquarters this afternoon. Your people will answer every one of their questions. And you will pray, Michael. You will pray to whatever God you believe in that I do not decide to sue you and your entire company into a crater of smoking ash. We are done. He hung up the phone without waiting for a reply. Back at the Aegis headquarters, a single line of text appeared on Kesha's monitor. Objective complete. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a cold metallic taste in her mouth. She had done it. She had fired the first shot, and it had been a direct hit. She stared at the screen at the lines of code that had brought a Titan to its knees and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Only the chilling absolute certainty of the power she now wielded. The door to her suite opened. Elena Vance stood there, a rare, thin-lipped smile on her face. It was the smile of a chess master who has just sacrificed a pawn to trap a king. Flawless, Ms. Williams, she said, her voice a soft purr. Absolutely flawless. You have just cost TechCorp their largest and most prestigious client. The first domino has fallen. Elena turned to leave. Get some rest. This is only the beginning. Kesha was left alone in the silent room, staring at her own reflection in the dark screen. The weapon had been fired. The war had begun. And there was no turning back. The aftershocks of the Viridian strike radiated through Aegis with the silent, thrilling hum of a successful kill. Kesha was no longer the new recruit. She was the architect of their greatest victory. In the cold, minimalist halls, analysts and handlers who had once looked through her now nodded with a mixture of awe and fear. She had become a legend in a building that had no heroes, only assets. Her days took on a new chilling rhythm. She was a ghost in their machine, tasked with dissecting the carcass of TechCorp's reputation. She analyzed the data streams flowing out of the wounded company, monitoring their frantic attempts to patch the holes she had exposed. She watched their stock price tumble, their client confidence evaporate. Under Elena's guidance, she began mapping out the next phase of the attack, a multi-pronged assault aimed at TechCorp's remaining flagship clients. She was good at it. Terrifyingly good. The work was a complex, beautiful puzzle that her mind devoured, but each small victory left a colder, emptier space in her soul. She was in her suite, tracing the weak points in a client's satellite communication network when the message arrived. It did not come through Aegis's secure channels. It appeared in the GhostNet, a deep web communications layer, so heavily encrypted and decentralized that in theory not even Aegis could monitor it. It was a place for spies and specters, a digital underworld she had only studied in theory. The message was a single line of text from an unidentifiable node. I was there the day of the open door. We need to talk. J. Chun. Kesha froze her fingers, hovering over the keyboard. The open door. A clear reference to the Chimera exploit. J. Chun. The name was familiar. She cross-referenced it with the employee manifest of TechCorp. She had downloaded a file she kept for her own private intelligence. Jennifer Chun, a senior programmer. Kesha remembered her face from the command center, a quiet, dark-haired woman who had been standing in the back, her expression unreadable amidst the chaos. A dissident, an insider willing to burn Michael Harrison to the ground. The thought sent a jolt of something she hadn't felt in weeks through her veins, the possibility of genuine justice, not just corporate warfare. An ally. She was wary. This could be a trap, a lure from Michael Harrison, though the sophistication of the message's delivery made that unlikely. This was the work of a professional. She used Aegis's formidable resources to arrange the meeting, selecting a location that was a spymaster's paradox, a place of perfect anonymity and maximum exposure. The main atrium of the Chicago Art Institute, a cavernous hall of marble and light filled with the constant shifting patterns of tourist crowds. Surveillance would be a nightmare. She arrived dressed not as an Aegis operative, but as her former self, simple jeans, a nondescript gray hoodie, her hair pulled back. She was a ghost again, hiding in plain sight. She stood before a towering ancient Greek statue of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare, and waited. Jennifer Chun appeared out of the crowd as if materializing from thin air. She looked different. The timid, overlooked programmer from the command center was gone. In her place was a woman with a cold, coiled stillness that reminded Kesha unnervingly of Elena Vance. "Ms. Williams," Jennifer said, her voice a low, even hum. "Thank you for coming." "You took a big risk contacting me," Kesha replied, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Calculated risks are my specialty." Jennifer gestured to a nearby stone bench. They sat surrounded by the murmur of a dozen languages and the silent judgment of millennia of art. "Your work with Viridian Dynamics was impressive," Jennifer began. "A textbook decapitation strike. Clean, efficient, devastating. You've sent Michael Harrison into a spiral of paranoia. He's started a full-blown internal witch hunt. Accusations are flying. Key personnel are being sidelined. He's tearing the company apart from the inside. Your job is already half done. I assume you're not here to congratulate me," Kesha set her guard up. "You want to help. Give me inside information to finish him off." For the first time, Jennifer smiled. It was a thin, sharp, humorless thing. "Help you," she said, a note of genuine amusement in her voice. "Oh no. You misunderstand completely. Michael Harrison is yesterday's news. A collapsing star. I'm not here to talk about him. I'm here to talk about you. And your employer." Kesha's body went rigid. "What about my employer?" "Aegis Security." Jennifer said the name, sounding like an insult on her lips. Run by the brilliant but predictable Elena Vance. Her strategy is classic. Find a wounded predator, bleed it dry, and then feast on the carcass. It's a sound business model. But it's also remarkably short-sighted. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Elena thinks she's a queen on the chessboard, maneuvering you, her prize knight, into position. But she's wrong. She's not a queen. She's just another piece in a much, much larger game. And right now, Ms. Williams, so are you." A cold dread, heavier and more profound than anything she had felt in the FBI interrogation room, began to settle over Kesha. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I am a senior acquisitions analyst for Omnicorp," Jennifer said. The name landed in the space between them, a monolith of silent global power. Omnicorp wasn't just a company. It was a constellation of holding firms, investment banks, and technology incubators. They didn't compete in markets, they consumed them. Omnicorp has been planning a major entry into the cybersecurity sector for years. Jennifer continued, her voice the calm, steady narration of a history already written. But the market is saturated. A direct buyout of a company like TechCorp or Aegis would be too expensive, too messy. So we waited for a catalyst. An event that would destabilize the ecosystem. A crisis that would wound both the lumbering giant and the circling shark. That crisis, Ms. Williams, was you. The world tilted. The art, the tourists, the Grand Marble Hall, it all seemed to warp at the edges. Kesha's fight for survival, her quest for justice against Michael, her Faustian bargain with Elena. It had all been a sideshow, a meticulously observed prelude to a war she hadn't even known was being waged. "You've been watching me." "We've been watching everyone," Jennifer corrected. "We saw Harrison's arrogance. We saw Aegis's ambition. We saw you, the brilliant, unpredictable variable. And we have allowed events to unfold. Now TechCorp is crippled, a ripe fruit ready to be plucked. Aegis is about to overextend itself in the ensuing chaos, making them a perfect target for a leveraged buyout. In 6 months, Omnicorp will own both of them, and the entire landscape of cybersecurity will be redrawn." The sheer scale of the manipulation was breathtaking. Kesha was no longer a victim or a weapon. She was a pawn, and she had just been made aware of the board. "Why are you telling me this?" Kesha asked, her mind racing. "Because pawns, if they are smart enough, can become queens," Jennifer said, her eyes locking onto Kesha's. "Omnicorp is not interested in Michael Harrison's mediocrity or Elena Vance's brute force tactics. We are interested in true visionaries. We are interested in you. Elena offered you a gilded cage, a comfortable life as her personal weapon. I am offering you something more." She slid a small, impossibly thin device across the bench. It looked like a piece of polished obsidian. "That is a key. It contains our full proposal. A position as the head of Omnicorp's new integrated cyber defense division. You will not be a weapon. You will be the one who aims them. You will not answer to Elena Vance. Elena Vance will answer to you." Kesha stared at the device, her heart hammering. A third door. A third cage, perhaps, but one with a throne inside. "How can I trust you?" she asked the question, feeling weak and naive. "You can't," Jennifer said with brutal honesty. "But you also can't trust Elena. Did she tell you that Aegis's primary funding comes from a venture capital firm that is currently under federal investigation for market manipulation? Did she tell you that her own position at Aegis is tenuous, that she needs this victory over TechCorp to survive an internal power struggle?" The information hit Kesha with the force of a physical blow. Elena, the picture of untouchable power, was just as desperate as everyone else. "Omnicorp believes in talent, Ms. Williams," Jennifer said, standing up. "Raw, untamed, visionary talent. That is the only currency that truly matters. Elena Vance sees you as an asset. We see you as an heir." She looked down at Kesha, her expression a blank mask of corporate diplomacy. "Your fight for personal justice has been very useful. But it's over. Now a real war is beginning. You have to decide which side you want to be on when it ends." Jennifer turned and melted back into the crowd, leaving Kesha alone on the bench. The small obsidian key felt heavy in her hand, dense with the weight of impossible choices. She had come here seeking an ally, a kindred spirit in the fight for what was right. Instead, she had found a new master more powerful and more ruthless than the last. She was surrounded by monsters, each one offering her a more beautiful, more elaborate cage. Her personal quest for vindication had become a footnote in a global power struggle. She was utterly, profoundly alone, a single critical piece on a three-dimensional chessboard with no idea how to play the game. She looked up at the statue of Athena, the goddess of warfare, her stone eyes seeming to offer no wisdom, only a cold, silent warning. The war was bigger than she had ever imagined, and she was standing in the middle of the battlefield. The obsidian key Jennifer Chun had given her felt like a shard of frozen night in Kesha's pocket. It was a constant physical reminder that her world had fractured, that the linear path of her revenge had splintered into a dizzying three-dimensional maze. She was no longer a duelist in a personal vendetta against Michael Harrison. She was a contested piece of territory in a war between empires. Back in the sterile elegance of her Aegis suite, she began to move. Her training had taught her paranoia as a survival instinct, and for the first time she turned that weaponized instinct against her own handlers. Using layers of proxies and ghost servers that would make her digital trail a nightmare for even Aegis to track, she began to dig into Omnicorp. What she found was terrifying. They were not a company. They were a gravitational force. Their holdings were so vast and diversified that their name rarely appeared in the press, yet their influence was everywhere, in banking, in logistics, in telecommunications. They were the silent, invisible architecture of the global economy. Jennifer's claims were not a bluff. Aegis, for all its predatory swagger, was a shark swimming in an ocean that Omnicorp owned. The gilded walls of her cage suddenly felt thinner, more fragile. She was an asset to a corporation that was itself a target. Her quest for justice had been a convenient catalyst, a useful spark to start a fire that Omnicorp now intended to control. The realization brought not fear, but a cold, clarifying rage. She was tired of being a tool. Elena Vance summoned her that evening. The summons was not a request. Kesha found her not in the strategy room, but in her private office, a minimalist space of glass and steel that overlooked the glittering, indifferent city. Elena stood with her back to the door, staring out the window. "You met with Jennifer Chun at the Art Institute," Elena said. It was not a question. Kesha's heart beat a steady, controlled rhythm. Her training held. "Yes. And I assume she made you an offer." "She did." Elena turned slowly. Her face, usually a mask of unshakable composure, was different. The mask was still there, but Kesha could now see the fine cracks in its surface. She saw the weary tension in her shoulders, the faint, almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes. It was the look of a queen who knows her castle is under siege. "Omnicorp." Elena said the word, tasting like poison. "The great, silent Leviathan. We have been aware of their shadow for years. They do not compete. They assimilate. They wait for others to fight, and then they consume the victor." She walked to her desk and gestured for Kesha to sit. Kesha remained standing. "This is no longer a hunt, Ms. Williams," Elena said, her voice losing its usual purr, replaced by the sharp, brittle edge of steel. "It is a war for survival. Omnicorp smells blood in the water. TechCorp's in ours. They used your personal tragedy to create the chaos they needed. They believe we will now exhaust ourselves, finishing off Harrison, leaving us vulnerable for their takeover." She leaned forward, her gray eyes burning with a cold fire. "We will not give them that satisfaction. We are going to end this. Now." She slid a tablet across the polished desk. The screen glowed with a single ominous title: Operation Decimation. "Your final assignment," Elena said. "This is not a warning shot like Viridian. This is a kill shot." Kesha picked up the tablet. As she read, the cold knot in her stomach tightened into a block of ice. The plan was not a hack. It was a digital apocalypse. It called for a full-spectrum, system-wide assault on TechCorp. She was to trigger a catastrophic failure that would not only knock their systems offline, but corrupt their data backups beyond recovery. She was to deploy a logic bomb that would freeze their financial assets, making it impossible to even make payroll. She was to sever their remaining client connections with a worm that would erase the digital handshakes that bound their networks together. It was corporate murder, a digital nerve agent that would not just cripple TechCorp but kill it, leaving thousands of employees jobless overnight. The company would cease to exist, its infrastructure and intellectual property left as salvage for Aegis to absorb before Omnicorp could even make a bid. Kesha's training warred with her conscience. The intellectual part of her, the part that Silas had forged in the Crucible, saw the brutal elegance of the plan. It was a perfect, devastating piece of strategy. But the other part of her, the part that remembered the terror on her mother's face, screamed in silent protest. She was being ordered to inflict a similar, if not worse, fate on thousands of people. The arrogant engineers like David Park, yes, but also the administrative assistants, the marketing interns, the coders in cubicles, the janitors who cleaned the floors. People who were just as innocent as she had been. "This will destroy the lives of everyone who works there," Kesha said, her voice flat. "War has casualties," Elena replied without emotion. "Their company is already dying. This is a mercy killing and a necessary act of self-preservation. It is them or it is us. Omnicorp will not leave two players standing on the board. You must choose." As part of the mission preparation, Kesha was given complete access to TechCorp's internal servers. It was a tactical necessity to map out the company's digital anatomy before the surgery. She opened the Human Resources folder. She told herself it was to identify key personnel whose accounts she would need to compromise. But she knew she was looking for something else. She was looking for a reason. She saw not just employee ID numbers, but faces, thousands of them. She saw David Park's file and the notes about contributions to his daughter's college fund. She saw Jennifer Chun's file with commendations for her loyalty and teamwork, a chilling monument to her long deception. She scrolled past the high-level executives and down to the lower floors. She saw a 22-year-old software tester whose performance review noted his enthusiasm. She saw a 60-year-old woman in accounting who had been with the company for 30 years. She read interoffice emails not about corporate strategy, but about birthday cakes in the break room, about sick children and upcoming vacations. The enemy was no longer a faceless, monolithic corporation. It was a community. A flawed, dysfunctional community led by a fool like Michael Harrison, but a community of people nonetheless. People just trying to pay their bills and get through the day. The words echoed in her mind. You will be a weapon. A weapon does not have a conscience. A weapon does not choose its targets. It only strikes where it is aimed. To follow this order, to press the button on Operation Decimation, was to finally and irrevocably surrender the last piece of herself that was not a creation of Elena Vance. It was to become the monster she had been trained to be. That night, she sat alone in her suite. The attack was scheduled to launch at midnight. The code was written, a masterpiece of destructive elegance. The protocols were loaded into the Aegis launch servers, triple-checked and verified. All it would take to unleash hell was a single keystroke from her terminal. She looked out the window. The city lights of Chicago twinkled below a vast, beautiful network of lives and dreams, each one oblivious to the digital war being waged in the towers above them. She thought of Michael Harrison. Her quest had started with him. She had wanted to see him fall, to see him pay for his cruelty. But this was not justice. This was annihilation. She thought of Jennifer Chun's offer. The key to the castle. Was that the answer? To trade one handler for another, to simply join a more powerful pack of wolves? The clock on her console ticked closer to midnight. Her console, the nexus of her immense power, displayed a single stark prompt, the culmination of her entire journey. Execute Operation Decimation YN. The cursor blinked, a steady, patient heartbeat. Her hand rested on the keyboard, her finger hovering over the Y. She was alone. Utterly, completely alone with her conscience, and a choice that could bring an empire to its knees. Her own personal justice had led her to this precipice of mass destruction. She had been forged into a weapon. The final terrible question was, would she allow herself to be fired? The blinking cursor waited for her answer. The blinking cursor on the screen was a heartbeat. Execute YN. It was the final question in a long, brutal examination. To press Y was to accept the cold mathematics of survival that Elena Vance had taught her to become the weapon she had been forged to be. It was the logical choice. The safe choice. Kesha Williams' finger hovering over the key moved away. Her hands, with a life of their own, began to type. Her movements were not the fluid, destructive poetry of the attack protocols she had just written. This was something else. Slower. More deliberate. She was not building a weapon. She was building a bridge. She typed a single elegant line of code into the command prompt. Abort sequence. Purge launch protocols. In the silent humming servers of Aegis Security, a digital apocalypse was quietly disarmed. Operation Decimation. The culmination of weeks of planning and millions of dollars of resources dissolved into inert lines of code. She had just defied the most powerful people she had ever known. She was a rogue asset, a disarmed weapon. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than the cold weight of her obligations. She felt free. Now she would rewrite the rules of the game. Using the absolute root access to TechCorp's network that Aegis had given her, she began to move through their systems like a ghost. She did not trip alarms or access sensitive client data. She moved past the frantic, paranoid security measures Michael Harrison had recently implemented, bypassing them with an ease that was almost contemptuous. Her destination was singular, Harrison's personal terminal, the one in his penthouse office, the one he believed to be his sacrosanct digital throne. On the screen of that terminal, a machine that no outside signal was ever supposed to reach, a simple text-only message box appeared. Mr. Harrison, we need to talk. Alone. Janus. Below the message was a string of characters, an encrypted access key, and a timestamp for a meeting in 1 hour. It was an invitation to a place that did not exist on any known network. A virtual meeting room she had built herself in the deep, unindexed corners of the web, a place where no one from Aegis or Omnicorp could follow. Michael Harrison saw the message and felt a jolt of pure electric fear. Janus, the code name for his invisible tormentor. He had spent weeks tearing his company apart, searching for this ghost, this traitor who had somehow orchestrated his downfall. He had suspected David Park, his own lieutenants, everyone. And now the ghost was inviting him to a meeting. His paranoia was at war with his arrogance. This was a trap. But it was also a confrontation, a chance to finally face the enemy who had humiliated him. His ego, the defining ruinous core of his personality, could not refuse. He had to know. At the appointed time, he locked his office door and logged into the secure node. He found himself not in a corporate meeting room, but in a stark, minimalist virtual space, a black void with a single simple table and 2 chairs. Seated in one of the chairs was an avatar. It was not a menacing, cloaked figure. It was a simple, calm digital representation of a young woman with kind, intelligent eyes. It was a perfect recreation of Kesha Williams. For a moment, Michael's mind refused to process what it was seeing. It was impossible. A glitch. A trick. "Hello, Michael," the avatar's voice said. It was her voice, calm and even. He breathed the word, a mixture of pure, undiluted hatred and utter disbelief. "It was you all along." "It was," Kesha's voice replied. "But I didn't come here to talk about the past. I came to talk about your future. And the future of your company. You have no power here," he snarled, his virtual hands clenching. "You're a criminal, a fugitive." "Actually," Kesha said, "I have all the power." On the virtual table between them, a new window appeared. It showed the code for Operation Decimation, the beautiful, terrible architecture of TechCorp's complete annihilation. "This is the weapon my current employers have ordered me to use against you. It is loaded, aimed, and ready to fire at my command. In 10 minutes, I could erase your company from existence." Another window appeared next to it. This one contained the complete, unredacted files on Project Chimera, his original code, his logs, the meticulous evidence of the frame job he had perpetrated against her. "And this," Kesha said, "is the evidence that will send you to federal prison for the next 20 years. I hold the gun that can kill your company, and I hold the proof that can cage you for life." Michael stared speechless. He was trapped. Checkmated. "My handlers at Aegis want me to pull the trigger," Kesha's voice continued, devoid of triumph. "A new potential employer at Omnicorp wants me to let you and Aegis destroy each other so they can pick up the pieces. I'm tired of being a piece in other people's games, so I am offering you a third option, a way out, for both of us." What are you talking about?" he stammered. "I am offering you a duel," Kesha said. "A one-on-one real-time battle. Your skill against mine. No teams, no handlers, no outside interference. A pure test of the very genius you believe you possess." She laid out the stakes, her voice as calm as a judge delivering a verdict. "We will enter a sandboxed virtual arena of my design. The objective is simple: gain root access to the other's core server. The first to plant their flag in the other's system wins. If you win," she said, "I will execute Operation Decimation, but I will first erase every trace of Project Chimera and the frame job. TechCorp will die, but you will be able to blame it on a catastrophic rival attack. You will walk away a tragic victim. I will disappear." She paused. "But if I win, Michael, you will walk into your boardroom tomorrow morning, you will tender your resignation, and you will give them a full public confession. You will confess to the Chimera backdoor, to the negligence, and to the framing of an innocent woman. You will take your fall, but your company and the thousands of people who work there will survive." It was a brilliant, insane proposal. It was a challenge aimed not at his logic, but directly at the cancerous heart of his ego. For weeks he had been haunted by the idea that he had been outsmarted by a delivery driver. He had told himself it was a fluke, that she had help. Now she was offering him the chance to prove it, to restore his own myth in his own mind. It was his one and only chance to reclaim the identity he had lost. "You think you can beat me?" he said, a sneer returning to his voice. "I'm offering you the chance to prove I can't," Kesha replied. The decision was never in doubt. "I accept," he said. The virtual world dissolved, reforming into the arena. It was a shifting, three-dimensional labyrinth of data nodes, firewalls, and encrypted pathways. It was a living network constantly reconfiguring itself, a digital representation of pure chaos. In the center of the void, 2 servers materialized, his and hers. The duel began. Michael attacked with the fury of a cornered beast. He threw massive, brute-force denial-of-service attacks at her server, attempting to overwhelm her with raw power. He launched a barrage of his oldest, most reliable exploits, the heavy-handed tools of a brawler. It was the digital equivalent of smashing a battering ram against a castle gate. Kesha did not meet his force with force. She was a fencer, not a warrior. Her defenses were not static walls. They were fluid, adaptive, almost alive. She didn't block his attacks. She absorbed their energy and redirected them into harmless data sinks. While he was hammering on her front door, she was quietly, methodically mapping his attack patterns, learning his rhythm, his habits, his rage. She set subtle traps, logic loops that sent his attack bots into useless recursive cycles, misdirections that led his probes into sandboxed honeypots where they revealed their own internal code to her. He was fighting a battle of attrition. She was conducting a dissection. Frustration grew in Michael. He was the CTO. He was the genius. He was throwing everything he had at her, and it was all disappearing into the void. His attacks grew sloppier, more aggressive. He saw what he thought was an opening, a momentarily lowered firewall protecting her core processor. Believing her to be weakening, he consolidated all his processing power into one final, overwhelming assault, a digital spear aimed at her heart. It was the mistake she had been waiting for. His massive attack left his own core defenses momentarily thinned, his resources overcommitted. She didn't launch a massive counterattack. She didn't need to. While his attention was focused on the tip of his spear, she simply walked through the side door he had left wide open. Back in his penthouse office, Michael Harrison watched in horror as his own defenses, the systems he had built and commanded for a decade, began to crumble. One by one, his firewalls dissolved. His access privileges were revoked. His control was stripped away. Then on his screen, his own server core was replaced by a single serene image. It was not a skull and crossbones. It was not a taunting message. It was the crisp, clean, unmistakable logo of the Pronto food delivery app. Checkmate. He stared at the screen, the logo a silent, devastating testament to his complete and utter defeat. The duel was over. The genius had been dethroned by the delivery driver, and in the humming silence of his office, the full, crushing weight of his failure finally descended upon him. The logo of Pronto food delivery burned on Michael Harrison's screen, a silent, damning judgment. It was not a flag of conquest, but a mirror reflecting the sheer, ludicrous totality of his defeat. He, the master of a digital universe, the architect of impenetrable systems, had been dismantled by a ghost from a world he had never bothered to see. He had been so obsessed with the hierarchy of suits and degrees that he had failed to recognize true power when it delivered him his lunch. For a long time he did not move. The fury, the arrogance, the lifetime of carefully constructed self-belief, it all crumbled, leaving behind only the hollow, echoing silence of the truth. She had beaten him. Not with tricks, not with brute force, but with a mind that was simply better, faster, and more elegant than his own. The duel had not just been a test of skill. It had been an irrefutable, undeniable revelation. With a slowness that spoke of immense weight, he reached for his phone. He did not call his lawyers. He did not call security. He called the private number of the chairman of the board. "Arthur," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Call an emergency board meeting. Now. There's something you all need to know." The TechCorp boardroom was a place of power, a high-altitude chamber where fortunes were decided. When the board assembled, their faces were masks of grim concern, expecting a devastating update on the corporate crisis. They found Michael Harrison standing alone at the head of the table, looking like a man who had aged a decade overnight. His Italian suit was askew. His eyes were hollowed out, and the aura of command he usually wore had been replaced by a shroud of brittle exhaustion. He did not use the projector. He did not reference a tablet. He simply stood before them and began to speak, his voice flat and devoid of its usual booming confidence. He told them everything. He started with Project Chimera, a decade-old sin of pride, explaining the back door he had built and foolishly forgotten. He confessed that the catastrophic cyber attack had not been the work of a sophisticated state actor, but a simple exploitation of his own fundamental negligence. A wave of shock and disbelief washed over the room. The chairman, Arthur Vance, a man with ice in his veins, listened without interruption, his expression hardening into stone. Then Michael's confession turned darker. He told them about a young delivery driver who had seen the truth in seconds. He told them how, in a fit of terror and wounded pride, he had orchestrated an elaborate frame job using the full force of his intellect to weave a web of digital lies. "I framed an innocent woman," Michael said, the words tasting like acid. "I used my position to ruin her life to protect myself. The entire crisis this company has endured for the past several weeks. It was all a consequence of my failure, my arrogance, my crime." He looked around the table, meeting the eyes of the men and women who had trusted him, who had built their fortunes alongside his. Yesterday, she defeated me. In a direct contest of skill, she proved that she is everything I pretended to be. The terms of my defeat were simple. A full confession. He placed his corporate ID and keycard on the polished mahogany table. I hereby tender my resignation as Chief Technology Officer, and I will of course cooperate fully with any and all ensuing federal investigations. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind a silence so profound it was like the aftermath of an explosion. He had not just resigned, he had detonated the entire foundation upon which TechCorp's reputation was built. The messages arrived almost simultaneously. One was from Elena Vance, a furious single-line summons to the Aegis headquarters. The other was from Jennifer Chun, a cool, congratulatory note with an embedded multi-million-dollar contract from Omnicorp. Kesha ignored them both. She was in control now. She initiated a three-way encrypted virtual conference from her suite. When the avatars for Elena and Jennifer appeared, they found themselves in the same stark minimalist room where she had dueled Michael. Elena spoke first, her voice a low, furious hiss. "You aborted the mission. You defied a direct order. You are a rogue asset, Ms. Williams. We own you." "No," Kesha said, her own voice calm and steady. "You don't. Your war with TechCorp is over. You will cease all hostile actions immediately." "And why would I do that?" Elena sneered. "Because," Kesha replied, "I have a complete, unredacted record of every illegal and unethical action Aegis has undertaken for the past 5 years, including the details of your plan to illegally acquire TechCorp's assets. If you or any of your operatives so much as glance in my direction again, that entire file will be anonymously delivered to the Justice Department and every major news outlet on the planet. Your war isn't with TechCorp anymore, Elena. It would be with me. And you would lose." Elena's avatar stared speechless, her digital face a mask of incandescent rage before she abruptly terminated the connection. Kesha then turned to Jennifer. "And as for you, thank you for the generous offer from Omnicorp. Please tell your employers that I have no interest in being a queen in their castle. My services are not for sale." "A foolish choice," Jennifer's avatar said, her voice cool. "You are making powerful enemies." "No," Kesha corrected. "I am choosing not to have enemies at all. I have recordings of our every conversation, including your admission of Omnicorp's plan to manipulate the market. I suggest you advise your board to find other less complicated investment opportunities." Jennifer's avatar gave a thin, unreadable smile, and then it too vanished. Kesha was left alone in the silent virtual room. She had faced down 2 empires and won. The game was over because she had refused to play. The call from TechCorp's board came an hour later. They were desperate, humbled. They offered her Michael's job, a staggering salary, a seat on the board, anything she wanted if she would come and save them. She agreed to a meeting. She stood before them in the same boardroom where Michael had confessed. She did not wear a suit. She wore her simple, clean clothes. She was not there as a supplicant or a conqueror. She was there as herself. "We will give you anything you want," Ms. Williams. Chairman Vance said, his voice heavy with sincerity. "I know," Kesha replied, "and I appreciate the offer, but I will not be your new CTO." A murmur of confusion went through the room. "The problem," she began, "is not just Michael Harrison. He was a symptom of a deeper illness. A system that creates men like him, brilliant, arrogant, and blind, is the same system that overlooks people like me until it's almost too late. Hiring me doesn't fix the system. It just patches a hole in a sinking ship." She looked at each of them. "I am not here to take a job. I am here to propose a solution. A new piece of code for the real world." She outlined her vision, not for a new security protocol, but for a new kind of institution, the Janus Foundation, an independent nonprofit organization to be funded by a substantial, irrevocable endowment from TechCorp. Its mission, she said, her voice ringing with a passion they had never heard before, will be to find the other Kesha Williamses of the world. The brilliant minds in forgotten neighborhoods, the prodigies who have to drop out of college to care for their families, the talent that your system is not designed to see. We will provide scholarships, mentorships, and resources. We will not just create the next generation of coders and engineers. We will create a more just and resilient tech industry, one where talent is the only currency that matters. It was an audacious, radical idea, but the board, humbled and facing public ruin, saw the wisdom in it. It was not just a solution, it was penance. It was a path to redemption. 1 year later, the Janus Foundation was a vibrant, chaotic hub of innovation. Housed in a renovated warehouse on the south side, Its workshops were filled with a diverse, brilliant group of young people, their faces lit by the glow of monitors as they built, coded, and dreamed. Kesha Williams, founder and chief mentor, walked through the room. She wore no suit, no title of power other than the one the students had given her teacher. She stopped at a workstation where a young girl from the foster care system was struggling with a complex algorithm. Kesha leaned in her voice, a low, encouraging murmur, and together, they found the bug. Across the room, a quiet, middle-aged man was patiently helping a teenager assemble a custom server. He was balding, wore simple, inexpensive clothes, and had a quiet, humbled air about him. It was Michael Harrison. After pleading guilty, he had received a sentence of 5 years probation and 2,000 hours of community service. Kesha had made one request to the judge, that his service be completed here. He was using his brilliant, broken mind to teach, to give back, to atone. At the front desk, sorting mail and greeting visitors with a warm, radiant smile, was Helen Williams. Her cancer was in full remission, her health restored. She was the heart of the foundation, the living proof of what they were all fighting for. Kesha walked to the window and looked out. Her quest had not ended in revenge or riches. It had ended in creation. She had learned that true justice wasn't about punishing the guilty, but about building a world where their crimes were less likely to happen. It was not about winning a war, but about rewriting the code of the world itself, replacing lines of exclusion and arrogance with a new syntax of opportunity, empathy, and hope. Thank you for joining us on this journey. This story is a testament to the idea that true strength is often found in the places we least expect it, and that one person's integrity can indeed change the world. It reminds us that competence knows no color, gender, or social class, and that the most profound victories are not those we win against others, but those we win for them. We hope this story has moved and inspired you. If it has, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that celebrate the quiet courage that lives within us all.